Hi everybody, and welcome to video 5 for Unit 8, Chapter 10. If you don't have your notes, please go ahead and take them out now. All right, so what we're doing today is we are still solving these quadratic equations. And remember, these form parabolas, and when we solve, we're looking for where the parabola crosses the x-axis. So methods that we've done so far have been factoring or solving by taking the square roots. But if you look in this case, you can also use what's called the quadratic formula. If you don't want to factor, you can use this method and it will work. All right, so what we need to do first is we need to identify A, B, and C. Now remember, these are all in standard form. So if you remember standard form, you have ax squared plus bx plus c. So when I identify right here A, B, and C from my equation, I want to say A equals 2, B equals 5, and C equals 3. All right, so now into this equation here, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going to plug a, b, and c into that equation. So I'm going to plug it in. So I get x equals negative b, so negative 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So we're going to say 5, I'm going to put in parentheses, squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 3, all over 2 times 2. Okay, so then you want to go ahead and simplify that. So when we simplify that here, we're going to get x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 25. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times 3 is negative 24 all over 2 times 2, which is 4. So then we have to simplify again because I can simplify what is underneath the radical. So I have negative 5 plus or minus the square root. 25 minus 24 is going to leave us with the square root of 1 over 4. Okay, and I can take the square root of 1. 1 is going to give me 1. So I get negative 5 plus or minus 1 over 4. All right, so now I have to separate these so I can get my two answers because I have a plus and I have a minus. So over here, I'm going to do x equals negative 5 plus 1 over 4. And negative 5 plus 1, so this is going to give me negative 4 over 4. So x equals negative 1. So that's my first coordinate pair. It would cross at negative 1, 0. All right, I'm running out of space, so I'm going to try to do this one over on the left-hand side. So my next one was minus. So I have x equals negative 5 minus 1 over 4. So then I have x equals negative 6 over 4, which I can reduce to negative 3 over 2. So my next coordinate is negative 3 over 2, comma 0. So these are my intercepts where my parabola would cross the x-axis. So those are my two solutions. Okay, so pause the video. You try this one, and let's see what you get. Okay, so let's see how you did. So this one, we had to identify A, B, and C. So A is 4, B is negative 12, C is 9. So remember, when you plug it in, it's negative B. So it's a negative parentheses, negative 12, plus or minus the square root of negative 12 squared. So remember, you want to put it in a parentheses, minus 4 times A, so which is 4 times 9, all over 2a, which is 2 times 4. So then when you go ahead and simplify, negative times negative will give you a positive 12. Negative 12 squared was positive 144. Here, negative 4 times 9 give me a negative 144. And if you notice these two in the next step, they simplify to 0. And I can take the square root of 0, which gives me 0. But then you're left with just 12 plus 0, which is 12 plus 0 over 8, which is just 12 over 8, and 12 minus 0, which is 12 over 8. So I'm going to get the same answer, 12 over 8 and 12 over 8. So that's going to reduce to just 3 over 2, comma 0. Remember, this one means it would cross on the axis. All right, so sometimes you'll get whole answers like these, or they'll be like easy to simplify kind of answers. And other ones, we might have to leave as simplified radicals. So let's take a look at the next question here. Okay, so this next one we have a equals 2. A equals 2. B equals negative 24. And C equals 33. So remember, we're going to plug it into our quadratic. So x equals negative b, so negative parentheses, negative 24, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 24 squared, minus 4 times 2 times 33. So minus 4ac all over 2 times a. Oops, which is 2 in this case. 2 times a. All right, so let's go ahead and simplify. So negative times negative is going to give me positive. So I get x equals a positive 24 plus or minus the square root. Negative 24 squared, you're squaring it. So you're multiplying the negative times the negative. So it gives me a positive 576. Negative 4 times 2 times 33 is a negative 264. All over 2 times 2, which is 4. So now we have to simplify again. So I get x equals 24 plus or minus 576 minus 264 is going to give me 312. So it's a square root of 312 all over 4. Okay, so now I have to see if there's a perfect square factor of 312. So you want to go through your list. Remember, you want to divide and see what you get. And there is. You can break this apart into 4 times 78, because 4 is a perfect square. So this would be over 4. But remember, you want to take the square root of 4. So you get x equals 24 plus or minus 2 rad 78 over 4. Okay, so then here, what you need to do is you need to separate your answers out. So we get x equals 24 plus 2 rad 78 over 4. And x equals 2 minus 2 rad 78 over 4. And now we need to simplify. This 4, the 24, the 2, and the 4 can all be reduced. I can factor a 2 out of all of them. So here I'm going to get x equals 12 plus 2 rad 78 over 2. Same thing on this side. I can take a 2 out of all of these. So I'm going to get 12 minus rad 78 over 2. All right, so how you write your answers for these, and I'm sorry there's not a whole lot of space, as coordinates, you would write parentheses 12 plus, oh, sorry, this one reduced here. Oh, shoot. Sorry, this one should have been, we took the 2 out, 12 plus rad 78. 12 plus rad 78 over 2, comma 0, and this would be 12 minus rad 78 over 2, comma 0. Because remember, you reduced that 2 out of all of them. Okay, you guys try this next one. Again, you're going to get something that has a radical. If it can be reduced, reduce it. If not, you leave it alone. Okay, so pause the video and try it. Okay, so let's see how you did. So in this case, once we got to simplifying the radical, there were no factors or perfect square factors of 233. So I couldn't reduce it in this case. I couldn't take out the, I couldn't simplify the radical. So I'm left with my two answers, 3 plus the square root of 233 over 16, comma 0, and 3 minus the square root of 16, comma 0. Okay, so those are our solutions by solving using the quadratic equation. So if you go to the next part of the notes, the last part, they're going to ask you to look and say, which method would you choose? So you want to use the method based on whatever is the easiest. Sometimes it's easier to factor, sometimes it's easier to use the quadratic equation, and other times it's easier to solve by using the square roots. So if you go ahead and look at this first one here, which method would you use? Well, because right away I can't figure out what the factors, if I multiply 5 times negative 14 and figure out the factors of 8 are, and then do the Russian peasant, that seems like a lot of work. And I can't do it very easily. So in this case, I would use quadratic equation. So quadratic equation. And again, because it's not easily factorable. So if I go to number 3 here, the easiest method I could see right away is to use factoring. Because if I look at the factors of negative 3 that adds to negative 2, right away I already know what they are. So this one, I would use factoring. Okay, you go through the rest, see which methods would be easiest for you to use. If you want to go ahead and pause the video, you could identify the methods and then try to figure out what the answers are. And so you don't have to solve for these, but you can if you want more practice. So pause the video and try it. Okay, so number 2 here, I would have done factoring because it's a difference of squares. So it would be easy to factor because we know that 25x squared is a perfect square, 169 is a perfect square. So you could either, and there's a minus sign in the middle, so you could go straight to your factored form of 5x plus 13 and 5x minus 13, and then you could solve for the x value. All right, number 4, because I can't figure out the factors of 3 that add to negative 5, I would use the quadratic equation. So number 5, because there's a 16 in front of the x squared and there's a 135, those seems like big numbers to multiply, so I'd go straight to the quadratic equation. And number 6, because again, it's a difference of squares. X squared is a perfect square, 16 is a perfect square, and there's a negative in the middle, I would factor because I would know I could go right away to x plus 4 and x minus 4, and that would be the factored form. All right, if you want to try these and solve them, the answers are online under the topics page, under the notes key, and you can see if you got them right. Thank you for watching the video.